Welcome to Self-Care Saturday with Indy Jones, and I'd like to welcome two very special guests. A lot of my guests I know from the Indy Jones, from the Kumba Publishing author writing perspective. But these two ladies know me as an educator, as I know them. And I reached out to my colleagues, my friends, and asked them if they would come on, and they agreed. And as much as we present professional development, this is still something that's new and different. But no fear, they have a lot to share, and I can't wait to hear them answer these questions and just to have a really nice conversation. So what I want to do is to give both of these women an opportunity to introduce themselves to you, and then we're just going to jump in and we're going to begin. And Denia, would you start, please?
I will. Thank you, Natalie. So my name is Denia Walker. I am a teacher specialist for Anne Arundel County Public Schools in the Office of Professional Growth and Development. My main responsibilities is to develop professional development for teachers of all grade levels and provide PD for all staff members in AACPS. Previously, I was an elementary educator, and then from there, I was a math specialist. And in my role as a math specialist, I was in charge of everything that was math in Prince George's County Public Schools. My love is my family and my friends and my dear colleagues, and I'm trying to learn to stretch myself. So Dr. Jones, Arthur Jones, has me stretching myself today. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. As a matter of fact, you said I love. That was actually one of my questions. So not to ask you something different at the end. But thank you. And Dr. Miller, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I am Dr. Zipporah Miller, and I am so honored to be over here. I am the Director of Organizational Learning for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and my main responsibilities is to oversee the professional development of teachers pre-service, when they come in for the induction period, and then as they grow as educators into teacher leadership in whatever role they decide to pursue in the field of education. Prior to that, I worked in the Office of Science with Anne Arundel County, but I also worked at the National Science Teachers Association. I have a passion for professional development, but I more so love science education and really extending that opportunity to the underserved, such as women and in high needs schools. I am a wife, I am a mother, and that is my favorite role in life. I am a daughter to Alfred and Florence Machayo. I am originally from Kenya, and my culture really stems from my mom and dad, who really instilled in me to continue to value my African values, even though I am raised in the United States and I'm raising two African-American men to instill in them the African values as well.
Wow, what a great introduction. And it's a perfect segue into my first question. So in my books, I use the term Black. I understand, and I use that deliberately in an attempt to encapsulate people who may view themselves as African-American. You know, I actually typically for myself define myself as African-American, but try to capture as much of the African diaspora as possible, with the understanding that not everyone defines themselves by using that term Black, but that's the term that I thought was the most inclusive when I thought about our collective experience. So that's in the vein in which I titled the books. So my question to you ladies, and we'll begin with you, Zipporah, what does it mean to be Black, to be a Black woman in the 21st century?
Wow, I really reflected on this question because what does it mean to be a Black woman in the 21st century? And my mother is my role model. And when I think about the 21st century, I really don't see much of a difference in terms of our role. I see that we still struggle. I see that we still have to really ensure, not that there's nothing wrong with excellence, because we're always in pursuit of excellence, but we must ensure that we're always raising above the bar. We're always reaching above the bar. I see the balance of now, because we hold a lot of leadership roles, the balance of being a professional and also being an excellent mother or an excellent wife. So being a Black woman in the 21st century, I still see that we still experience a lot of the challenges that existed before. The one difference that I feel, and I am welcome to push back on this, is when I see the community that my mother lives in with other women and other Black women, be it African American, they always raise each other up without question. I'm not sure in the 21st century that we embrace that. And my hope is that we get to a place where we can go back to the fact that we realize that we are one body, and we can embrace that sense of community where we raise each other up and are raising each other's talents and capitalizing on each other's talents rather than competing with one another.
Wow, excellent. Thank you. Denia, what do you think about your experience as a Black woman?
So I'm going to add to what Zipporah said. I do think 21st century women, as a Black woman, we're learning how to come together. I think we always have, but I think now in these professional roles, more than personal roles, we are learning how to really work together and accept that we are all different, right? That every Black woman has a different story. And I think often we are told through media that we have the same exact story. We have the same exact line. I think now the 21st century Black woman, we can all be different and we can accept each other's differences and learn how to work together. I think as a 21st century Black woman, we have a lot of opportunity, right? I think we're still fighting against a lot of barriers, but I think the barriers are coming down and we're willing to fight against it, right? I think now women are just willing to just go there, right? Like we are standing our ground as Black women in 21st century. We're not taking some of those old ways with us moving forward. We're changing them. You're either coming with us or we're going to leave you, right? I think we're adopting some of those things that other cultures have already had, right? But I think as Black women, we're just like, no, we're not standing for it. We're not doing it. And this is how we're going. We're making a change and we're going to do it together. But I think we're learning that togetherness piece. I think we're really learning that now as Black women.
Yeah, I think you both made a great point about rising up and doing it together, not necessarily as competitors, have to necessarily beat out the next person, in that we can all be, to use Zipporah's word, excellent together. We can think about what does that really look like, but we can get back to that. So my next question, so you think about resilience, what words, images, or people come to mind? Let's begin with you, Denia.
So when I think of resilience, I do first think of like my mother and my grandmothers, right? Personally, they have been through a lot of struggle, right? A lot of oppression that I have not faced. My grandmother, one of my grandmothers, is from Edgefield, South Carolina. I will never know her experience like that, right? She lived in a totally different time frame in some ways. But when I think of resilience, I know that she had it. My grandmother also worked a full-time job in the 50s, in the 1950s. That wasn't typical for any woman, especially a Black woman. And she held that position for a very long time. So when I think of resilience, I start with my personal family. I think my mother has been through a lot of struggle, but has really been optimistic and positive and moved forward. So for me, resilience really is understanding your struggle, sort of accepting that and moving forward to something better and knowing that you can be better. I think you also asked, what does it feel like? Am I right, Natalie?
Actually, I didn't say that. It actually is in the book. I just asked about words, images, or people. But okay, you're right. Because how we do in PD. I do have a part in the book and ask what resilience looks like, sounds like, and feels like. So that is in there.
That's what happens. You got a preview beforehand.
No. And it's kind of like what we do, right? Because that's helps frame a holistic picture by going there. No, that's great. So really like your mom, your grandmother, but it goes back to those women and those role models in your family. So that's kind of like what comes to mind when you think of resilience.
Absolutely, it really does.
Great. What about you, Zipporah? Words, images, or people? And
Wow. I would echo Denia 100%. When you asked that question, the first person who came to my mind was my mother. Um, my mother is beautiful. And I've always wanted to be like her, right? I see strength in her. You know, she is strong and also resourceful. Mm-hmm. I watched her support my dad. I remember as she was rising through her career, and I was a child. And this is reflecting as an adult because I didn't realize it as a child. But as a child, I saw her rising in her career. You know, my dad was working in the Ministry of Agriculture and rising up in the ranks over there. And then my mom was working in the office of the president, rising up in her career there. And then she had to move when my dad got appointed as ambassador, and she wasn't working at that point. But I saw how she not only supported her husband, my father, but she also did a lot of community work and a lot of volunteer work. So she never lost her identity. Another part of my mother that I saw is when she sat at a table, and I never realized this until I became an adult. My father ate first, the children ate, and then she would sit down. And this is after she had worked all day, volunteered in the community, and just ran around, make sure that there was food on the table, but she was always the last to eat. And I never realized that until I saw that, because she still maintains that now, but it's not uncomfortable, but now I'm like, Mom, you gotta eat, you gotta eat. But she still maintains that same demeanor. When we're there, she wants my husband and I to eat, and she sits. And I'm like, no, it's Mom, you gotta eat, you gotta eat. If there's 5 people in the room and there's 4 things on the table, I know who's gonna say no, my mom. So when I think of resilience, I think of my mother.
And man, and it is something I think about women, Black women, African women, putting husband first, putting children first, and putting yourself last. Mm-hmm. I mean, we could probably have a whole conversation on that when I go to my mother, my in-laws, and my mother-in-law, she loves Christmas, so she cooks up and everything. And it could be almost anything, Easter, what have you. And she's always the last to eat. And I get that. I kind of experienced it because when you're the one that's cooking, you are so concerned about everyone else. And I don't know, have you ever cooked to the point where you've cooked and now you're not even hungry?
Yes.
You know, it's like you did all this, you have this strength,
kind of.
Here we are. You talked about me having African-American experience and you having your Kenyan experience. Mm-hmm. And yet we're still talking about these women of color and different cultures, but in the end, a lot of behaviors are the same. And sometimes I think it's just about how we view ourselves as women, how society view us, and sometimes what we value as well. You know, taking care of others oftentimes before we take care of ourselves. And that segues later about the self-care, because sometimes I think we don't always get to our self-care because we're so busy making sure that everyone else is taken care of. So we can get to that.
Can I add to that, Dr. Jones? One of the things, as you talked about self-care, I was like, my mother was always put together, right? Mm-hmm. You know, even at the end of the day, when we sat down on the weekends, I never saw her in per se, like when I just want to put on my sweats and just relax. She was always put together, you know? And I would like to ask her that question, whether she, when we didn't see it, how she practiced self-care, because always a smile on her face when things were going wrong and we sitting at the table and things were happening. She always had a smile on her face at the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, at the end of the day. You know, she was always dressed. Her hair was together. She didn't wear much makeup, but she always made sure the way she was dressed. So, wow, I found that fascinating when you said that, so I'd like to know how she, maintains self-care.
Yeah, it's because when you said, I observed my mom doing these things when I was a child. And I never thought about it in a certain way until I became an adult, a woman, a mother myself, or a wife. And I think that happens a lot, right? We see our parents, but we kind of don't really see them. We don't see them through the same eyes. And it takes a lot, for us to really see them as people. And I think that happens more often the older we become. And then we kind of start to see them in more nuanced ways because no one is smiling and happy all the time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's an image, not saying it's a false image, but there are layers probably to that whole perception of how she chose to present herself to her family, to her friends, to her community, to her husband. And so maybe as now two grown women, you may be able to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So let me ask you guys, and you can answer this, either one of these questions. I always give people an option. So, and we'll begin with you. I think it's Zipporah's turn, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So describe a time in your life when you either felt truly resilient or a time in your life in which you weren't as resilient as you wanted or needed to be.
So, do you mind if I do both? Because they kind of counter one another, right?
No, people have done that. So yeah.
Okay. When I get angry about something, so when I see something or experience something that's not right, the emotion that you see from me is tears. I don't scream, I don't yell, but you just see tears streaming down my face. So as a young educator, and at this time in my career, I was really trying to advance in my career. I just completed my master's, and it was my desire to become an assistant principal. And it just seemed like I was not getting there. All of my friends who I went through the master's program together, they all had been placed. But for whatever reason, I interviewed and everything, and I wasn't making it. So I remember in the school where I was, and I moved to a different school, to a different position, my supervisor, my principal at the time, I expressed my desire to her. And then when I started interviewing, she had seen in several occasions when some things were just not right or not fair. I would express how I felt, but sometimes when my words came out, they came out with tears flowing down, right? And this was me trying to keep my composure so that I was not unprofessional. And I don't know where I got it from, but that's what happened. So I remember overhearing a conversation. Well, I wasn't overhearing because I was within the vicinity. And she said to the regional assistant superintendent, Zipporah works hard, she's brilliant. Everything about the job, I believe that she can do, but I don't know whether she's strong enough. I've seen her cry in several occasions. I did not stand up for myself. I did not go, because it wasn't a secret conversation. It's a conversation she was having. I was in the vicinity. I could have easily said to her later, I know when you spoke to so-and-so, you mentioned this, but I think you probably should understand that many times when I see things that are not right or not fair, when I'm expressing my opinion, the way I keep my composure and maintain my professionalism is my anger is seen in tears. So that's a time when, and it was probably about, I want to say about 20 years ago. So I was pretty young in my career. Well, let's fast forward now, where now, maybe about 8 years ago and very recently, that there was situations that occurred. And I'm going to speak of one very distinctly. I remember two of them, but one very distinctly that I remember. I was working in an organization that was predominantly Caucasian. And in science, you know that most of the scientists are male and they're Caucasian. So I'm sitting at the table. Every time I went to the meeting, it was just me, right? And we got a new supervisor. And I remember him saying to me, very casual conversation, You know, when it comes to the use of technology in professional development, I can't learn anything from you. I was shaken at the time. And of course, I wanted to respond, but I took a step back. Maybe about months later, I had this conversation with him. And this is when I felt I was resilient, because I did not let him, I didn't address it at the time, but I knew I was not going to let that comment go. Because I'm at that point, and now I know who I am. I know what I bring to the table. So you are entitled to your opinion, but then I felt, okay, I'm going to have this opinion, I'm going to say this. And now when I get upset, every once in a while, you might see tears, but I think I've got to the point where when I sit up, and I'm never ashamed of that. I'll sit up at the table, and I said to him, I said, you know, when you told me that you would never learn anything from me, I want to impress upon you that as my supervisor, I've always believed that you're an intelligent person. And I was shocked to hear that come from you, because I never thought that you would have a comment such as that. And I think I said it a little more stronger because I wanted him to understand from my perspective. I thought that that wasn't a well thought out comment. And from my opinion, I felt that it was very shallow because he didn't take the time to know who I was. And I wanted him to understand that if you really wanted to know who you work with, you'd have taken the time to learn who we were and what we brought to the table. And two, yes, I was offended by that comment. And let me tell you who I really am.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for sharing both of those stories. Denia?
Yeah, so one, Zipporah, I do understand people's perception of tears, but I also think that is not something for you to carry, right? I think some people have some inner issues, to be honest, they need to really deal with, because we should not deem people as being deficient because they're crying. It's a way of showing your emotion. So don't ever let that, and because I'm a crier also. So I understand, right? But I think a time when I was not the most resilient was I was teaching, I might have been like a third or fourth year teacher, and it was testing time. And I have always been an inclusion teacher. So I had several students that were special ed, they needed accommodations. And for me as a teacher, I was like, I did not mess around about accommodations for my students, right? Like, if you're going to be the adult in the room, you need to know their accommodations and stick to them, right? So I was very in tune with my students and the accommodations that they needed. During that testing time, you're typically not supposed to check your cell phone at all. And in the moment, my father was actually having a having a heart attack, and I did not know. So I am teaching my students, it's testing time. After the test is over, I look at my phone, I have like 35 missed calls from my sister. So my sister never calls me, right? Not doing work. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So I call her, we find out, they rush him immediately to have surgery. But also at the time, I was supposed to be buying a home. And I'm being a first-time home buyer with my father, right? So a few weeks before he actually had the heart attack, we went out to see houses. It's really like a joint experience, right? So I enjoyed it. So once my father's going through that open heart surgery, I was just like, no, I'm not buying a house. I'm not doing any of that. And I felt like my resilience really just dropped. And I'm used to being able to really pull from that resilience, but in that moment, I just couldn't. But the great thing about it is I learned my emotional triggers, right? And that the fact that my father is a support for me, so not having that support was a trigger, right? And then also I'm an emotional eater. Found that out eating, that good old food that they had there. That cafeteria actually was pretty good. But I finally noticed that behavior through that moment of not being resilient. So in some ways, it built my resilience because now I know an emotional trigger, a support that I need, and some of the behaviors that I tend to have if that's not there. So even though it was a moment of not being resilient, I am grateful for that moment because it taught me a lot.
Yeah, wow. You shared a lot of stuff. I want to thank you for going back to Zipporah's point about tears and emotions. We talked a little bit of that with the ladies that I met with before you guys, and just about the fact that how we learn about emotions, how we manage emotions and the whole thing about tears, like you said, what type of personality traits are we attaching to people who are open with their emotions, open with their tears, as opposed to people who bottle it up inside, who always so stoic, and you don't really know what's going on with them, and they could be totally sick and inside mentally and physically, versus us thinking that people who openly show tears, who openly cry, that's what a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's not just women
right.
who have that perspective. I mean, I've seen women do that with other women, women who cry, and we look at that as being a weakness. So it's not simply something I would say that's typically or fully always in the domain of men. Although I think all too often men are still raised not to perhaps be open with their emotions, to think of crying as a form of weakness, that they aren't strong in some type of way. And I think that women, we've internalized that as well. And we put that on men.
Right.
I hate to say that too. We put it on each other, but I think we also put it on men. And if you have men who are more, let's say, more emotional creatures, who are really maybe more in touch with all aspects of their emotions, that sometimes we as women think that they aren't as manly or whatever attribute you want to apply to that, but a lot of times it's not really positive traits. And that stuff I think that men really need to deal with, and they do, and have to grapple with as far as how to define their manhood. Right. And you did talk about emotional triggers, and the emotional triggers, I have that also in the book as well. And you talked about your dad being a big emotional support with you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a question I think is related to that. And I believe, Denia, you can go first. So what does community mean to you?
Oh, wow. So communities does definitely start with family. I have a large family, so my community is real big, right? But it really does speak to family and people that you can really be your authentic self. And I think as Black people, sometimes that's difficult for us. And I think people don't understand why it's difficult for us, is because we don't have a lot of people outside of who look just like us within that community that we can trust, right? So I definitely think family is part of my community and how I see community, but also I think, in a racial aspect, honestly, just other Black women. I do think in all of my experiences, the first people or person that I tend to gravitate to is another Black woman, right? Within that parameter of wherever I am, or within that environment. So that's what community sort of means to me. But I do think community can be wider than family and personal colleagues. And I'm learning to embrace, and it's okay to kind of be open to bring new people into your community, but family is probably where I would start.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love what you said about being your authentic self. That is super important. And Zipporah, what do you think? What does community mean to you?
Community. When I think about community, I think about my immediate community, and then I think about the greater community. And as Denia said, my community, or my immediate community, are my family, and then my really close friends. Denia, I like the word that when you said, be your authentic self. Anyone who accepts me for me, my great aspects and my flaws, because we're all working on something, right? And everybody who accepts it, accepts me for it, doesn't make an excuse, but, accepts me for it. My community or immediate community are the individuals who can say to me, you know what? Your slip is showing, and be okay saying it. And those individuals, and I don't mind getting constructive criticism, but I enjoy people who can tell it to me and really be down to the core and say it with love and say, no, you're pushing back. I'm trying to help you, and don't accept no for an answer, because those are the individuals who want to see the best of me, right? And then the larger community for me is the community in which we live in or the community in which I feel we need to impact. So for me, the larger community would be what I would say the underserved population. I have a passion for those who have access but don't know how to get the access. And I believe it's my responsibility because I had access to certain things such as education to be able to say, hey, you also have access to this, and let me show you how you can get it. So you will find, in my free time, there's one thing that I will not give up. I will not give up my community service. I really am passionate about serving my community. And I remember a friend of mine, we were going out to lunch. She's a colleague, but also a friend now. We were going out to lunch and I was walking up the hill and I happened to stop to talk to someone. And I don't know how the conversation got to, so where are you going to college? And how can I help you get to college? And she said to me, she said, Zipporah, you help everybody that you see. But I just feel that, when you have access to certain things and others may not know of it, it's not that they don't have access, they don't know of it. Not only tell them about it, but show them how they can get it, and then make it their decision whether they will take it. But don't just say, here it is, show them, walk them through it. If it's a college application, don't give it to them. Show them how to apply to college. Show them where the FAFSA phones, where they can get them. And when they're due, really go, really be intentional about making sure that they know everything there is on every roadblock they could possibly encounter. So I went the long way to answer that. I feel that community can be answered for me in two ways: my immediate community and my inner circle, which is really small, and then the greater community in which I feel that we need to impact so that we can see the greatness of everybody who is in that community.
Absolutely, absolutely. Access, even just the information. When you talk about the challenges of what it means to be a Black woman or a Black man or someone simply who is not, perhaps white in this society, a lot of that is about access to information, access to resources. And so, and there is a privilege with us. So we're Black women, but we're also, like you said, we're educated, we're professional. I mean educated, I mean in the traditional sense, as far as having matriculated through colleges and university, having obtained degrees. That's what I mean by educated. But we have certain experiences that can lend itself to supporting all different types of people. So we have to recognize where we have privilege and when we don't. And so what we do have is something that is transferable. And I think that you make a great point. I also think that's the reason why we're all three are in the same profession as far as education, because we do have this community, bigger picture type of way of looking at the world. So think about looking at the world. So now you think about yourself. So my question to you is, when you look in the mirror, and this is for you to answer first, Zipporah, who do you see? So when you look in the mirror, who do you see?
When I look in the mirror, who do I see? I see a lot, and I can tell a backstory, but let me answer the question first.
Okay.
I see a beautiful woman. I see an intelligent woman. I see a strong woman. I see a compassionate woman. I see a wife. I see a mother. I see a friend. I see a professional. My backstory about this is I always used to see myself as inferior. In my family, I'm the middle child. My oldest sister was always the most beautiful one. And, she, you have the best teeth and look at your smile. And they always talked about how intelligent she was. And then, of course, the youngest. And then there was my brother, who was the only boy. So I kind of was like there. So I used to think of myself as very inferior. And I attribute that to the first incident that I talked about, me being resilient. But as I started to grow as an individual and grow spiritually, I learned that, you know what? You have to love you and you have to love who you are, right? And I never saw myself as beautiful. Matter of fact, I would say, you know what, as a child, I don't think I was beautiful. I think I was ugly. And most people who see my pictures are like, what are you talking about? But I had to understand that beauty comes from within, you know, and it doesn't come from the outside, you know. And the one thing I want to know is, you know, how do I make people feel is very important to me, you know? And that's what I base beauty on, you know? How do I treat other people? How do I ensure that I'm serving other people? So I say all of that to say, I probably wouldn't have answered this question the same way 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But today, I feel so good that I'm able to say that I'm beautiful, I'm intelligent, I'm strong, I'm compassionate, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a professional.
Yeah. I mean, but that's beautiful. That's growth, right? Even 10 years from now, even with all those wonderful things that you see in yourself, 10 years from now, doesn't mean that your answers will be exactly the same because you don't stay in one spot. It's good. Denia, what about you? What do you see when you look in the mirror?
So I see a girl that I love, a woman that I love. I'm just being honest. But I agree with Zipporah. It took time to get there because honestly, for Black women, it's a little harder, right? That we're not always presented in a way to always see ourselves as these beautiful creatures inside and out. But it does take time to develop. So now I am, and I see myself as a lovely Black woman. When I look in the mirror, I see, a friend, a family member, a supportive person. I see a person who is a good listener. I see myself as optimistic in some ways, but also realistic, that we're going to go through some stuff, but we can get through it, or that I can get through it. When I look in the mirror, I see someone who's trying to learn to be a little better every day, right? Like during the pandemic was great in some ways because you get a chance to really be reflective, and some of the everyday noise was turned down a lot, at least for me, to really reflect and really now say, these are some things I have done really well. These are a few things I want to work on, right? So just being honest, there's some things internally I'm just like, maybe we can do that a little differently. Maybe we can work on that. So I see that person that's growing every day in the mirror, and I still love her, right? With all the things that I know I'm continuing to work on. So that's who I see in the mirror. I like her, girl.
I love it, Denia. I love it. I love it. I love it. Dr. Jones, I don't know, when Denia said a woman that I love, I don't know why this went in my head, but I started to think about the fact that, there was a time that I would not wear braids because I thought, or I would not wear my hair natural because I thought a beautiful person or a person that you love has to look a certain way, has to dress a certain way, and I have since come full circle where whether it's a professional, a wife, whether I'm going to church, whether I'm serving the community, if you are not in tune with who I really am internally, I'm going to wear braids and I'm going to wear them well, right? I'm going to wear my hair natural. I'm going to wear my hair with a perm, but whichever way I do it, I still see a woman that I love. So I love that, Denia. I love that. I love that you said that.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that's beautiful. And think about so much of our identity is wrapped up in hair.
Right? Yes, totally.
It's wrapped up in hair. I mean, that's a whole conversation itself. But when people transition, let's say you've had a perm and you make that transition, so much of it is about how you view yourself, how other people view you. And that community becomes important as well, because if, for example, if your friends like what you're doing, if your husband or your significant other likes what you're doing, it gives you confidence. It gives you that courage to go out in the world, maybe with your natural hair or, whatever it is that you want to do. But so much of our identity, I find, is in that. We did the perms, everything. When I was a kid, my mom used to press my hair. And then I got to the point where, as much later, I just let my hair grow out. My hairstylist who actually interviewed, I think when she does it, she calls it the big chop. You know, when you just come in and you're just like, I'm just getting rid of all that perm tear and everything. And so, and I got to the point where I did this, but this was like a long time coming. And it's an emotional journey. But my daughter, I've never put perm in her hair, but it was easy for her because she had a mom whose hair was natural. Both her grandparents was natural. And she also came along in a time in which we were getting back to that. Yes. I think when I came up, people weren't doing that. It was like, oh, perm and jerry curls. That's what you had, you know? That's what it was. She laughing. It's the truth, right?
Let your soul glow.
Like, you know, yeah. She came along at a point whereas young people, they're doing so much with their hair and they aren't allowing themselves in certain ways to be put in the same type of boxes. They really are shining, but it helps when you have that community. You see a lot of other Black women who have a lot of different things going on, whether it's extensions, whether it's perm, whether it's afros, whether it's locks, whatever it is. When they look around their school and they see Black women representing themselves in a lot of different ways. And I think it's the great, powerful thing about young people. You know, those 18, 19, 20-year-olds out there, that they aren't afraid of some of the same things that probably maybe held back perhaps their mothers and their grandmothers. Were you going to say something, Zipporah?
No. I was just agreeing with what you said.
Okay. I totally agree.
So I just have two questions, and I'm gonna let you ladies off the hook. No, you guys are totally on the hook until the end. But so I think we kind of like indirectly touched on self-care. And I thought about self-care a lot when you told the story about your dad, because I know about Denia's dad some, and as far as some of the things that he currently does with self-care. And I bet after that incident, he probably took on a whole lot more because it's literally about life and death, right? Self-care is always about life and death. But when you have that physical illness that could take you out, take you away from your family and just yourself, self-care, it kind of becomes even more important. So whose turn is it to go next? Is it Zipporah?
I think it's Denia.
Is it Denia? Okay.
I think it's Denia.
All right. She might just be saying that, but
no. I
think she might be right.
Yeah, I think I went first the last time.
So Denia, so when you think about self-care and your whole your self-care practices, talk about maybe what you do, or maybe some things that maybe you want to add to your self-care practices.
So I have been working on self-care for a couple of years, right? I think in my 20s, I was terrible at self-care. Like I just wasn't aware of it. And I was just taking on a lot and not really thinking about it. And then I think the last couple of years, I really have been more in tune about self-care. So one for me is drinking water. I drink a lot of water every day, but it feels good. And I can feel the difference in my body when I really do take the time to really replenish using water. So that is a big self-care move for me. So I have water bottles all over the place. So that is a big deal for me. I think another self-care technique that I always try to, or self-care practice, is taking a moment of silence, right? So sometimes before I start the day, I may sit in the car for like a minute, right before I walk into work, just give myself a little bit of silence. Or when I come in the house after work, take a few minutes of just silence and just get my thoughts together, relax my body. And it just helps to kind of calm down the world a little bit. And then another self-care technique is really having time with people that I love. So really spending some time with my family, spending time with my friends. We may go over each other's houses, do a paint night, even though nobody can paint or draw. It's kind of a mess, but we get to spend some time together. So those are probably the big three for me of self-care, like really drinking water, a little bit of silence, and then spending time with those that I care about.
Okay, cool. What about you, Zipporah? What is self-care like in your life?
I think Denia was in my head too. I never used to drink water. I will substitute it for Pepsi or Coke. It didn't matter. I would drink soda after soda after soda. Wow. Sugar was my thing. If I drank coffee, I was drinking the sugar with the coffee. If I drank tea, I was drinking sugar with the tea. And I found when I gave up And I didn't really give it up. It was almost like, I was trying to get healthier. And I said, okay, let me drop a little bit of sugar. So I don't use sugar like I used to. I mean, I still eat cake and stuff like that, but I substituted drinking water, or if I wanted a soda, I drink sparkling water, right? I can't drink a soda anymore. But the good news is I don't get that crash like I used to get. Never realized that that's what was doing it. I don't get that crash. So I really enjoyed, for me, that was such a powerful move, especially as we get older. We're not getting any younger, to make that move where I drink water. I try to exercise regularly, haven't gotten there yet. Pre-pandemic, I was on a rhythm.
Yeah, you
And
were.
then, when I stopped going to the gym, I started walking, and then work took its place. But so that's something I'm still working on in terms of prioritizing my exercise. I don't like to exercise, but I need to exercise. So, prioritizing my exercise, because I find when I do it, I think clearer. If I'm frustrated about something, I kind of let it go on the exercise bike or whatever that I'm doing. Spending time with people that you love, I don't have to do anything, nothing. We have a date with the pool this afternoon. I love to swim, so thank you, COVID, because I've kept my hair in braids and now I can swim whenever I want to swim, right? So making it, I never used to go swimming, but now, I do it a lot. And another piece, which is still taking a lot of time and I'm still working on it, but my oldest son gave me one of the greatest compliments. He probably doesn't realize he did it, is I take on too much because I want to help. So if I see a void, I take on too much. Then I stress myself out because I want to make sure I deliver on all aspects. If I say I'm going to do it, I want to make sure I do it, but I'm not just going to do it. I'm going to do it well. But now I set boundaries, and I say to even my family, I say, you know what? Here's what I've done. Here's what I need you to do. And I don't go back and try and do it. I hold them accountable of doing it. I've also started that practice at work, where, I will give the instructions, and sometimes I'm like, I'll just get it done. No, I'll just say, I need it by Tuesday, or I need it by Thursday. That has really helped me in terms of relieving a lot of stress factors that I have, because I was just taking on too much. And so my son said to me, Mommy, I see that nowadays you set boundaries. When you say that you need us to get something done, you ensure that you don't take it on. We have to do it, And that was a compliment for me, because before, if it wasn't done by a certain time, I'd just take it on and do it.
So. I think that goes back to when we talked about, Black women, and, kind of like either we think it has to be done a certain way, which is typically our way, or sometimes, and we enable people.
Yeah.
And I think when you move out the way and you allow people to engage in a task that they know they probably can do, that they can do, you're also helping them as well. We're not necessarily doing anyone any favors by doing their work for them, or by lifting them up when they can pull themselves up, or getting in the way of their personal growth. But like you said, you're also reducing your stress, reducing your load. All of that is going to make you a happier and healthier person. And it's great. Isn't it amazing when you have these young adult children and they look at you and they see stuff like that? Or it also lets you know they see you as a person too, which is actually really cool when your kids grow up and you really see, because there's different types of conversations that you can have with them, but it gives you insight into how they view you. So that was wonderful. At the last question, you guys already answered. I typically have these one question at the end about I am or I love, but you ladies so wonderfully answered both those questions in previous questions that I don't have to pose it. So I have my last question for you, and it's really open to interpretation. And Zipporah is first, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the last question, Zipporah, is what is the color of your resilience?
Oh, wow, that was easy. The color of my resilience is transparent. The color of my resilience is transparent, because you don't have to see it, but it's there.
Uh, you see her, she trying to end on that note. She trying to get you,
She should have went first. I mean, last. That's a mic drop. That's a mic drop
Like,
moment. I'm supposed to follow that.
Come on, yes you can. Come on, Miss Walker. All right, so what's the color of your resilience?
So I am going to go with the color that Natalie has on her book for the Black women is purple. I think purple is strong but calm, right? So when I think about resilience, I think purple is very fitting that we are strong, we are realistic about the things we need to do and get done, but we're optimistic that regardless of the barrier, we are going to fulfill, our own destiny. So I think resilience is really about understanding that it is a struggle, that there are some obstacles, but you can create some supports and tap into some resources to really pass by that barrier and reach that goal that you want to pursue in life. So I think resilience is purple. But Zipporah, I loved your answer.
I know. But that was great. I love how you framed it in that you don't have to do it alone. And that's actually a part that I put in my introduction to the books, that it's a journey that we undertake. You could begin it on your own, but it's a journey that you don't have to take on your own. As a matter of fact, it's really the most beneficial when you involve others and when you have that great support system, and then you in turn can also be a support system for others. That whole collectiveness, that community, and that's extremely important. And I appreciate the community that you guys develop. We are PGD community, but we also are Black women, very different. We have a lot of commonality, but our uniqueness, I think, is also our collective benefit. And I thank you for spending an hour of your Saturday. I thank you for your genuine interest in what I do beyond being a teacher specialist, beyond being at PGD. And I know that you support me in that, and it means a lot. I value that tremendously, which is the reason why I really wanted to have this opportunity to speak with you guys in a way that we don't typically have an opportunity to at work, or at least not as in-depthly, because we have work to do, right? But I appreciate it. I really do want to say that sincerely. And thank you guys for being here, and I appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your time with your family or your sister going out, and then Zipporah with her husband and both sons today, or just your youngest?
Just the two of us, my hubby and I, going swimming.
See,
nice.
That's what you have to do. You have to continue to have those dates. Mm-hmm. When you're an empty nester, man, that's what keeps that marriage strong, because you guys keep doing stuff as a couple, not just as mom and dad.
Yes.
Beautiful.
That was another actually self-care for me, where we actually are now intentional about making sure we do something, No,
I can definitely relate. Both our kids are out the house, and we're doing stuff even more so now than ever, but you have to be conscious and deliberate about that, especially when you have the kids in the house, to go out on dates, to take that private time, because in the end, that's going to be back to you two again. And you have to have something to talk about, right?
You're right.
You have to have something to talk about to keep that relationship strong. So thank you guys again.
And I want to thank you, Dr. Jones, for having it. It's such an honor to be on here. It really is. This topic is so timely. And the fact that you targeted it, or should I say, target might not be a word, but we're intentional about making it for African-American women, to me is even more special, because we tend to forget about ourselves, and we tend to think that it's not okay not to be okay. And you have really put it out there that it is okay not to be okay, as long as we don't stay there. And that's what I see in the premise of you having this book out there, to say, you know what, we're all in this together. And sometimes we're okay, sometimes we're not okay, but it's okay not to be okay, as long as we realize we're not okay and we reach out for help. So thank you for doing this.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, ladies.